It was a very smart decision from our producer to set this up inside. We're going to do the paper review this morning. Paul Newman is here from The Athletic, Cameron Ponsonby from The Independent, Mark Butcher, who's got so many gigs I can't possibly mention them all. The Athletic, it's a new name in cricket. It's known for its football coverage and coverage of sport in the States. Why cricket?
Well, they've wanted to do cricket for some time, as I understand it, and they felt that this was the perfect time to do it. An England-India series, you know, it's almost as good as it gets, isn't it? And I was delighted to be asked to be part of it. They asked me to cover this series for them. It's a platform and a website that I have a lot of admiration for. I'm a subscriber. I really enjoy their football and their ice hockey, which is a passion of mine. And it's been lovely, yeah. It's been.
So you get a couple of pieces in the New York Times, quite a distinguished bylines. How about your stage of your career?
It's owned by the New York Times, as you say, and I think a couple of my pieces have appeared in their pages, and yeah, that's one of the great newspapers of the world, isn't it? So that's a real bonus at my time of life. A really nice thing to happen.
Cam, you're doing for the Independent this week, but you're a young freelancer. I mean, thinking about how much cricket there is around the world, is it a good time to be a young freelancer, because there must be a lot of opportunities out there?
I think so. So I'd describe it as a much shallower but wider industry than it probably was 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, newspapers were the kind of main entity of media as well as TV. And now the newspaper industry is a bit smaller, but there's now podcasts and social media. So you kind of want to spread yourself as thin as possible while still providing a high quality service for everyone. But mainly that the opportunities actually come overseas more than they do domestically. So it's not much use me emailing around all the newspapers and saying I can get to North London. They go, well, we can get there as well. But if you say I can go to Grenada and cover the match for you there, I can be in New Zealand, then people are interested, because you're effectively kind of saving them a bit of money by them not sending a correspondent of their own, and then you kind of cover the sport for them.
You basically killed him.
He got the athletic job ahead of me.
I'm the youth policy.
But you've also been an editor, so you've sat behind the desk as well. I was thinking that back in the day, cricket would kind of own the summer space much more than it does now. I mean, at the moment, there's Wimbledon, there's the F1 that we've seen, the Lions are in Australia, the Club World Cup has started over in the States. I mean, cricket has to kind of fight its corner more than it ever had to do in the past.
That's true. I mean, that's been coming for a few years now, really. But cricket does have to fight for its coverage, which is why the Athletic taking it on has been a boost, I think, for a new platform for it. It's hard. It's always hard. Football obviously dominates everything. But this was the one time of the year when the summer sports could breathe, really. This weekend particularly, you know, we've got the weather for it at the moment. But as you say, the British Grand Prix, Wimbledon, cricket and the rugby, of course, the Lions, that's only once every 4 years. But no, it's a constant fight, but really the Club World Cup is a nuisance, because it's getting in the way of the...
If Spurs were there, you'd be all for it. I know you're a huge Spurs
If Spurs
fan.
were there, it'd be the back 4 pages. Don't worry about the cricket.
Right, some of the stories in the papers. The big one, this is the Sunday Telegraph. Bazballers must swallow pride and bat for a draw. Nick Holt's piece, and he mentioned the fact that there's only been one draw under Ben Stokes' watch, which is, of course, that rained-off game at Old Trafford a couple of years ago. And he mentions a nice little line that came out in the Test documentary with the first Test match here at Edgbaston of that Ashes series, and he quotes Nathan Lyon, who said, "Rooty looked at me and goes, 'We're in the entertainment business, no more draws.'" So, Butch, they're in a bit of a philosophical quandary, aren't they? This is the team that absolutely disdains the draw, but they're in a situation where they're not going to be able to win this game. Will they contemplate the draw right now?
Well, I don't think it takes too much of a shift of attitude, really. I think you would look upon escaping from this game as a win in itself, you know. They talk about sort of being in the entertainment business. We can all remember entertaining draws. You know, the people on the edges of their seats with a wicket to go, 3 overs left or whatever it might be. Those things are entertaining. It doesn't necessarily mean because the game is drawn that there is no value in it whatsoever. And I also think that the motivation, all the motivation you need was India not declaring last night. I mean, they have given you a gilt-edged chance to escape without losing a match that really and truly they ought to have been buried in. And so, you know, use that to your advantage. You know, it's the type of thing where you might pin up an article by Paul Newman slagging your team off in the dressing room to try and get the players to kind of be up for the fight. It's exactly that same situation. These guys have kind of handed us the chance to get out of this with a draw. Let's take it. You know, let's show a bit of steel and take that opportunity and go to Lord's 1-0 up still.
On a day like yesterday, which is not a good day for England, they invariably put up a coach to the post-press match conference. It might be Bethell, the bowling coach. Yesterday it happened to be Marcus Trescotty. So inevitably a lot of the questions were about this issue and throwing it forward to the final day. How did Tres respond to the question, are you going to play for a draw today?
He conceded a little bit that a draw would be a positive result, given the circumstances. And I wouldn't be too surprised if England did end up playing for the draw here, because we've kind of seen this general regression from the kind of true blue Bazball of 2022, where they kind of wanted to take it so far beyond the line to show what would be possible that then you can regress and kind of become a more fine-tuned product. We've seen that with Ben Stokes batting. When he first started batting in the Bazball era, he was a lunatic. He'd run down the wicket almost like second and third ball, and he was trying to show his teammates, this is how far you guys can take this if you want to. And in the last year or two, we've seen them move on from Jimmy Anderson, because we go, actually, no, we want to focus on India and the Ashes in the following year. Actually, no, it is a results-based business. We need to make sure we're winning this series against India, this series against Australia. So I think if they did kind of shut up shop a little bit, it would be a continuation of a theme we've seen creep in over the last year or so.
Did he actually mention the D word, though?
Don't mention the draw. He mentioned it once, but I think he got away with it. I think I think he did mention the word, but you could tell he was trying to skip around it and
dance around.
Yeah, he didn't want to. He didn't want to annoy Stokes and McCullum, obviously. But it's how they go about it, isn't it? Because there's no point in them going completely into their shells and trying to sort of prod around and survive 90 overs that way. We've seen Ben Duckett talked recently, didn't he, of that time in India when Alistair Cook asked him to bat for a draw, and it was hopeless. He was he was out for a 16-ball duck or 20-ball duck or whatever it was. So I think they do have to play naturally, but it's playing naturally without being reckless, isn't it? And they're positive players. I didn't have any issue with the way Duckett in particular batted last night. I know he got out. They bowled well at him in this match, but I guess it's just the mindset of being positive, being natural, try and see off the hard ball, and as we've seen, once that ball gets soft, batting's a lot easier, isn't it? And batting 90 overs should be possible.
I guess, Butch, there's two aspects to it. There's will England contemplate it, and then if they do, are they good enough to do it?
Yeah, I mean, there should be. There isn't any reason in terms of spin or sort of dramatic up and down bounce that should make it impossible. It's just a matter of will, really, I think. And I'd love to see it. You know,
and you made the point in your first answer that some of the great moments down. I mean, there should be nothing morally wrong with getting a draw. If you can't win, no team goes out to play for a draw. But if you can't win the game, then the next best thing is not to lose it. And you know, many of the great rearguards down the years have kind of gone down in legend. Really, you can think of Jimmy Anderson and Monty Panesar was such an electric finish to that game at Cardiff.
And also, on the subject of being in the entertainment business, are the fans, and we're told there are going to be a good few thousand of them coming through the gates today, are they going to be more entertained by you falling over in a heap before lunch, or by you clinging on by your fingernails at the back end of the day? I think we know the answer to that. So there are positive ways of drawing matches, or there are positives to come out of that type of thing. And I think it would be a massive feather in the cap of this team if they could do it.
Andy Zaltzman in The Observer, he's the statistician for TMS, and he writes a column, a statistics-based column in The Observer. And this game has been an absolute stats fest. I've just got Shubman Gill here, first player to have made 200 and 150 in the same test, second player to have done that in the same first-class match, 430 runs in this test, second only to Graham Gooch's 456 at Lord's in 1990, high score by an Indian captain, high score by an Indian player in England, seventh player to score a century in his first two matches as captain. I mean, you could go on and on. It's a complete stats fest. The question is, how interesting is the cricket if the balance between bat and ball, which is what we've seen in the first two tests, is completely skewed towards the batters?
Well, I thought the first test pitch at Headingley was perfect, actually. It went the 5 days, but there was a little bit there, wasn't there? There was a bit of pace and bounce and a little bit of turn as well. And I agree with you that if India had picked Kuldeep Yadav, they might well have won on that last day. This one has been a disappointment, I think. There's been no pace, no bounce. Now, we know Ben Stokes talked before the game about how he does liaise with groundsmen and ground staff and try to make requests of what he wants. And they want flat pitches, yes, but they also want a bit of pace and bounce, and that's what this pitch hasn't got. And I think it's not been a great wicket for Test cricket. But of course, the counter argument is that India's new ball bowlers have done perfectly fine on it.
We'll get on to them in a minute.
So, but it's been a new ball wicket, hasn't it? And Akashdeep has used the new ball brilliantly. But I don't think it's very hard for someone. I know we're going to talk about Shoaib Bashir, but it's very hard for someone like him to make an impact, not only on surfaces like this, but also with England always bowling first, because there's just not been enough in it for them.
The implication there is short boundaries, flat pitches to order for England. You know, a few years ago they had two of the greatest seamers to have played the game in Anderson and Broad. I mean, that was how England's great strength on in-home Test matches was marshalled, really. You back your bowlers, you have pitches that do a little bit with a Duke's ball, and opposition teams from abroad struggle in English conditions. Are England playing to India's strength by asking for these kind of conditions, or playing in these kind of conditions?
I don't think so, because, well, to quote Ben Duckett of 18 months ago, the more the better, kind of in terms of run chases. They're happy to combat in run fests. England aren't so much kind of opting to bowl first as bat last, and so if the wicket maintains its structure and you can score runs on day 5 and you back yourself to chase anything, maybe not 600s, then for the most part you're going to find yourself in the position you want yourself to be in. I think it's a hard line to balance in terms of if the pitches being asked for are wanting to maintain their flatness, relative flatness over the course of 5 days, to make a pitch that both suits that necessity from England's point of view and also provides entertaining cricket where it doesn't break up and we don't see that normal pattern of play that we're used to where batting gets harder in a match. Sometimes ground staff will get it right and sometimes ground staff will get it wrong. And I don't think it's just in terms of the England team where we're seeing this pattern in first-class cricket take shape. At the Oval, I think it's 20 first-class matches in a row, win, toss, bowl. And this is what teams across the country, some at least, are moving towards, where they go, right, we actually want to take the new ball on the fresh wicket, nip out on top order quickly, and the conditions will get easier to bat in, and that's kind of the pattern that England have been following.
You know, throughout the game, there'll always be periods where, you know, conditions are in favour of the bat. Sometimes you'll get a few years where conditions are in favour of the ball. Over the history of the game, the runs per wicket has stayed remarkably similar, actually, from about, you know, the early years of the 20th century to now. It's about 35 to 37 runs per wicket. That suggests that the balance between bat and ball has remained pretty constant over the years. But I can't remember a time when the pitches have been so true and flat in England, where there's been so little sideways movement. And the balls seem to be playing a part as well. The Duke's ball seem to be going softer, because there's scarcely a day goes by where the teams are not asking for the ball to be changed.
Yeah, for sure. You know, there are also trends, aren't there, in terms of what the bowling styles of the day might be. You know, we haven't seen any reverse swing really in the first 2 games, which is, given how dry the summer has been, which has been odd, which is another issue perhaps with the ball. And also, you know, in years gone by, that interesting stat about the Oval, obviously back in the time when I was playing and we had Saqlain Mushtaq and Ian Salisbury, you'd bat first and bolt and skittle people out when it was ragging at the end. So that was very much the trend. I think the sort of the level of high-class spin bowlers knocking around, you know, the Muraleys and the Warnes and the Saqlains and whatever, is kind of, that era is kind of as long past us now. And so not only have you got pitches that are perhaps maintaining their integrity for longer, but you haven't got people who can really exploit them with brilliant leg spin or mystery spin, which is part of the disappointment of not seeing Kuldeep so far in the series, because
we'll see him at Old Trafford.
I think we probably will, yeah. And if it's roasting hot at Lords and they're 1-0, we might see him there as well. But you know, that type of thing. If you don't have the players who can kind of spin the ball on glass or whatever it might be, it does make batting that much easier as the game wears on than it perhaps might have been if you had a guy who can rag it square.
We touched on Shubman Gill, the batter. Of course, he had a decision to make yesterday around the declaration, setting England 608, which was in some ways a testament to Ben Stokes and his team.
It was. I thought it was an incredibly defensive declaration. I couldn't believe it, really. I particularly couldn't believe that passage of play just before tea when Jadeja was on a bit of a go slow. It just seems as if there wasn't any real plan there, and as you say, it looks like England have got into their heads. Reading Simon Wilde in the Sunday Times this morning, he makes the point that they wanted to, and DK was making the same point, wasn't he, before they came to us, that they wanted 2 goes with the new ball, with a newish ball, one last night and one this morning, while the ball might still do something, and then you've got a second new ball to come after another 64 overs. But I did feel that if England had done something like that, we'd have been piling into them, and with the level of scrutiny that's on Indian cricket, if they don't pull off this victory, there'll be almighty questions to be asked.
Yeah, I mean, one of the problems with declaring so late is that you open yourself up to the potential of rain as well on the final day. That's what's happening at the moment outside here at Edgbaston. We've had a heavy downpour. The full covers and sheets are on. The forecast is pretty good, I think, throughout the rest of the day, but we'll obviously get a bit of a delayed start whilst the ground staff get to clear this up. So we'll continue to natter away. And back page of the Daily Mail, England rip it up. So Lawrence Booth writes that England are considering changing their entire seam attack for next week's 3rd test at Lord's after another punishing day at the hands of India's batsmen in Birmingham. I mean, some of the figures at the moment for England's bowlers don't make pretty reading. Wokes has got 3 wickets at 96. Carse has got 6 wickets at 52. Bashir's got 8 wickets at 59. Tonga a little better, but mostly tail-end wickets, 11 at 33, and Stokes 6 at 35. Are they going to change their entire attack, do you reckon?
Yes, I think they will. I wrote on a similar subject actually this morning myself. I do think they'll change at least 2 of the seamers and possibly 3, but I don't think it's a great surprise really. I think it was always planned, even if this test had gone better. This attack has looked a bit limited, hasn't it? It has looked lacking in an X factor. It's been well signalled that Jofra Archer is going to come back, and it's very exciting, but it's also something of a gamble with 18 first-class overs under his belt in 4 years. But basically, if England go to Perth for that first Ashes test with the attack we've seen here, they're not going to win the Ashes, are they? So they've got to get something in there. These guys have had 2 very demanding 5-day matches. They've bowled over, how many overs is it in this match, conceded 1,000 runs. So I think we'll certainly see Archer. It sounds like we're going to see Gus Atkinson, who hasn't played since injuring his hamstring.
I'm going to ask you, Cam, I mean, how much of a risk is that? Archer's played 1 first-class game in 4 years. Atkinson's coming back from a hamstring. If they play them together and possibly replace Wokes with Sam Cook, maybe, how does that attack look?
Well, I guess England are changing it both through kind of necessity and choice. There was always going to be rotation across the 5 test matches, and now we've got the first of the back-to-back ones. So even had England gone better with the ball, they still might have been looking to freshen it up. I think there is that inherent risk where if you have Archer, Atkinson and Ben Stokes, who himself has had a lot of injury problems, that makes up 3/4 of your seam attack, and you're kind of getting through the match with your fingers crossed going, can someone just not break down? Can all of you get through here fit and healthy, and then we'll be fine?
Well, there is Jofra bowling this morning. I mean, Butch, you talked about we talked about how flat the conditions were, but India's bowlers, particularly their new ball bowlers, and Akash Deep, who's made a big impact since coming in, they have out-bowled England here. They've got more out of the conditions. How worrying a sign is that when you throw it forward to what might be coming down the pipe in places like Adelaide with a Kookaburra ball?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't suppose Chris Wokes will be going on the Ashes tour for a start. They'll need somebody with a little bit more gas, shall we say, for the Kookaburra, for Australian conditions, and in that they'll have, hopefully Atkinson, Wood, Archer. Carse is impressed actually. I think he's been very good, and Tongue is somebody that you could probably use in and out. You probably wouldn't base an attack around him, but having someone that can knock the tail over is always quite handy in Oz. So I think they'll be fine. I think the issue really is trying to, with all of these injuries and with the amount of time that Jofra in particular has been out of the game, you're just concerned. You have no idea how he's going to react to a full day in the field. Never mind 3 of them. I mean, England bowled, fielded on all 4 of the days of the Test match so far. And if you add to the fact that with the way that England bat, even when they're batting well, they don't bat for very long. The first innings we got 407 in less than 90 overs, and before you know it, the bowlers are back out there again. So there's sort of the resilience required for hot conditions, hard pitches underfoot in Australia and here. It's going to be hot next week at Lord's. Is something that is untested, no matter which combination of bowlers they put out there. So that's going to be the most interesting thing for me over the rest of this summer.
And of course, we haven't touched on young Shoaib Bashir, who's an integral part of this attack, essential part of this attack. But Simon Hughes in the Sunday Times has said, a finger spinner who can't bat is a luxury in the modern game. Is it time to replace Bashir with Jacob Bethell? He writes, essentially the days of a specialist finger spinner who's a batting rabbit, think Tufnell, Panesar, and before them Pat Pocock, are almost done. It's a shame, as their tales of going for a gallon with the ball or being frightened out of their wits at the crease add rich chapters to cricket's great narratives. But in these bat-driven times, England cannot accommodate many passengers. I mean, there's two sides to this. Shoaib Bashir is young, is inexperienced, he's the youngest England bowler to 50 wickets. There have been elements that have been good in his short Test career so far. And he's asked to bowl often on a first-day pitch because of this ploy of putting teams into bat.
Yeah, and I think he's getting better, actually, as well. Look, if England had wanted a finished article, somebody that could bat 8, hold the bat down at 8, and be a proper, reliable, wicket-taking spin bowler, then Liam Dawson would have played 50 Test matches by now. But for whatever reason, he has not figured at all. And to the point in the article, I don't think you should be replacing a young spin bowler who's just gone to 50 wickets with a guy who is a part-time spin bowler and a top-order batter. I mean, that is not the answer at all. England quite rightly have...
But there are other options. Yeah. They could look at somebody like Liam Dawson or Jack Carson.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Who are specialist spinners who do bat.
England are correct and have been correct under Ben Stokes to want a specialist spin bowler in any lineup, pretty much for any conditions. And I think that's absolutely right in Test match cricket. What you're not going to do, I hope, is volte-face and go for somebody who's a bits and pieces, a bit of Joe Root, bit of Jacob Bethell. That'll do us. It won't. That will not do at all. And so, Jacob Bethell is an argument or a discussion for another time in terms of your batting order, your top order batting, and he might offer you a little bit of left-arm spin. Great, but he's not the answer to a spin bowling issue. Bashir is getting better all the time. He really is. He's had it tough, bowling first, day one, very fine players of spin. Pitch is not turning or whatever, but I think he's getting better and better. The amount of rank sort of bad balls, drag down deliveries, full tosses and all this kind of stuff, he's almost wiped them out over the course of the last 2 Test matches. Shown really good command of sort of drop and drift, does get plenty of revs on the ball. He just hasn't had any sort of conditions. Yeah. And don't also forget how spinners love having runs on the ball.
Yeah.
The difference between being out there and bowling when you've got 500 on the board yourself.
Well, if he was in this position now with
Correct.
600 to
Correct.
play with,
then you'd have an idea as to how useful or how good he is. But we haven't seen that situation.
5 for 286. I mean, you need to be resilient as a young spinner. Those are painful figures, aren't they?
Well, he's learning the job at the highest level, isn't he? Because we know he's not getting a game at county level. That's the curiosity of this selection. But he's very much Ben Stokes' pet project, isn't he? He picked him with Australia in mind, and he wanted him to get however many tests is under his belt before they go to Australia, because he's tall and he can get bounce. And it's tough for him, but the one major thing in his favour is that he does have such support from his captain, and Stokes captains spinners in particular brilliantly, doesn't he? So much encouragement. And you can just see it whenever he goes for 4 or 6, he's clapping him and encouraging him on. I actually think I might disagree with Butcher slightly on that one, in that I think there is a case for playing Bethell as your spinner in Australia, but simply because, as Simon pointed out, and I think Tim Wigmore points out in the Telegraph, some great spinners have got such a poor record in Australia. I could see an England team which had, say, Jamie Smith at 6, Jacob Bethell at 7, Ben Stokes at 8, the way he's batting at the moment, 3 seamers, and that could be just as potent a lineup as having Bashir in it for the Ashes. But
who are going to be England spinners in
Australia? I can see a look on your face, you don't agree with that one.
I think for the first test it will be Bashir. I think since Australia changed their Kookaburra ball a few years ago, I think it's the stats something along the lines of overseas players, or maybe as a whole, seams averaged about 30, spins averaged about 60. And so spin's just not playing as much of a role as it did before. Nathan Lyon hardly bowled a ball last winter in the kind of BJT. And so whether England will, of course, and I hope for Bashir's sake, on a human level, where he's been basically picked for this event and you're backing him in over the course of 2 years for him to have that opportunity. But whether England do opt to go for kind of 4 seamers and those 2 part-timers in Root and Bethell, it's not. I don't know if I agree with it or if I like the idea, but I'm interested in it in a kind of thought experiment about whether they do go down that road. I think Bashir has the first Test match, and then can I say we'll see from there.
Okay.
I think, given the struggles that Australia's top order are having, and the mix and match sort of nature of their top order at the moment, that we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see conditions go back to sort of more traditional roads, hard, bouncy, non-seaming pitches where spin does play a part in Australia. I'd be very surprised if they decided to take us on things that were nibbling around all over the place when their batters can't score a run themselves.
There's also, in regards to Jacob Bethell being, A, he doesn't bowl that much for Warwickshire in first-class cricket, but B, left-arm spin has historically gone very poorly in Australia, and the thought process is that you have to be an off-spinner if you're going to be a finger spinner, because you have to use the rough that kind of the bowlers create in their follow-throughs, and left-arm spinners land the ball in the middle of the pitch where there is no rough, but people aren't allowed to go there, so the ball just kind of skids on. So the idea, having just presented a possibility where
You
England
just
go...
poo-pooed yourself.
Yeah, that's what I like to give both sides of the story.
Very balanced of you.
Thank you.
Before I throw back to Wardy, we'll just touch on the terrible tragedy of Diogo Jota, a piece in the Sunday Times. Dressing rooms can be a refuge, and how clubs cope with tragedy. Michael Caulfield, a psychologist, he makes the point that sporting dressing rooms are not like normal places of work, Butch, that football is the harshest environment in life, but it's also the kindest place to be in life. In moments like these, you find football at its most giving. Deep down, players share a bond. They all come from remarkable backgrounds and have been through remarkable challenges to get here and understand how precious it all is. I mean, your club has suffered its share of tragedy, hasn't it? We both knew Ben Hollioake well, for example. How did the Surrey dressing room come through all that?
Not particularly well, I have to say. We had Graham Kersey before then. It was young wicket-keeper batter who was going places, and he died in a car crash in Australia as well, maybe 3 years before Ben did. And it kind of ripped the heart out of everybody. The dressing room thing it's very odd, and we'll remember this, is that you're very, very close to people when you're at the gig, or when you're on tour, or when you're playing during the course of the summer. But then you might go 6 months without seeing half of them. It's not like you're on the phone every day. But for the time when you're together and when you're representing the same team, whether it be national or international, that bond is very, very strong. You're all going through the same things, and you live with each other, in each other's pockets for a long period of time. And it is very, very difficult. Everybody will pull together and try their very best, but everyone deals with grief and the stuff that comes with it in completely different ways. So I remember after the Graham Kersey loss, it kind of brought everybody together, and with Ben it kind of had almost the opposite effect. Not through anybody's sort of lack of care or anything, but it just wiped everybody out, and it made life very, very difficult for that particular group of players for quite a long period of time afterwards.
Difficult days for Liverpool, our sympathies there. It looks